Good evening, ladies. It is week 15, and it is the fantasy football playoffs in the Massillon Football League. Congratulations to everybody who made it. Congratulations to everybody for just making it through this grueling ass season, even if you didn't make the playoffs. Like my co-host Dan, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing great. I have nothing to look forward to tomorrow at all. So my Sunday is free, except for watching the first place Cincinnati Bengals.
Fair enough. However, you're playing for your money back. I mean, that's something.
I'm pretty confident. Spoiler alert that that's not happening. So, thank you to the Browns, man, beating Baltimore today. All right,
yeah.
Deshaun Watson's unstoppable.
Yeah, he looks very stoppable. But however, the Browns with Deshaun Watson.
Not if you're a masseuse.
I have nothing to add to that. Obviously, we don't need to talk about, playoffs and things like that because they're happening, so we don't have predictions. But I do have some really cool Week 14 takeaways, Dan, and then if you have anything you want to throw to this. So my takeaways are all with the record book because I was updating our record book this week. So Phil, with the best record in league history at 13-1. Congratulations, Phil. We talked a lot about that last week. And as I mentioned last week, Phil is now on a 10-game winning streak. The league record is an 11-game winning streak by Brian Lewers back in the day. And for those who have been in the league for a while, you know that Brian Lewers was absolutely dominant, and he is actually going to come up again in just a few seconds. I actually need to bring the league record book up just so I can talk about a few of these things. But so very, very good week for Phil, a very good season for Phil. Where things got interesting, I got trapped in a little rabbit hole that I wanted to look at. Taylor has 51 wins over the last 6 seasons. And Brian Lewers was only in the league for 7 seasons and has the most wins over that span of time, Dan, with 53. Taylor finishing just 2 wins behind that. And then over the last 4 seasons, in which I am now the longest active streak of making the playoffs 4 years in a row, I have 36 wins. The best 4-year streak ever was my wife, Marlia, with 37 wins. So a couple of us recent success chasing history, not quite catching some of the best managers in this league. And Dan, I'm sure I want to give you a little bit of a shout out here. You have remained atop the record book despite a losing season this year.
Yeah, like I was telling you before, I was pretty nervous about that. It does matter to me because I think overall record and overall showing success over an extended period of time is important in my opinion.
But yeah, and I just realized I never updated the record book to show Phil after I told everybody I updated the record book. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. Make sure he gets his moment in history there. So yeah, 13-1, big week or big season there. And then, like I said, some other cool things. Dan, did you have any other takeaways from last week, or were you just mentally checked out?
No, I'm not checked out. I joke that I don't care anymore, but I do. No, I was pretty excited Monday night. I was hoping that Taylor's comeback on you was going to cost you the playoffs. For the longest time, you were down by like 0.05. I was like, man, if you could just miss the playoffs by 0.05,
that would have been rough.
That would be awesome.
Well,
of the podcast anyway.
Shout out to my new best friend, Rob Motz, who in defeating Greg got me into the playoffs. So Rob, with a completely meaningless win for Rob himself, gets me into the playoffs. So I'm all for it. Thanks, buddy. I really appreciate you.
I thought last week was fun. I was hoping for a couple more closer contests going into Monday night with the playoffs on the line for some people, but unfortunately didn't play out that way. But some upsets, I thought Greg would make the playoffs, and he's sitting here in the losers bracket with me now. So welcome.
Yeah, not only with you, against you. So
he'll be moving on.
Yeah. I actually disagree, but we're going to get to that in just a second. And when I say just a second, I literally mean right now. We're going to talk about these matchups because we don't have playoff things to predict. That's kind of the takeaways. This is probably going to be one of our shorter shows, but we're still going to have fun with it. I went back and did a little research, Dan, so I have the outcomes from when each of these games took place during the season. So last week was my tied for worst week of the season. I went 3-4 with my picks last week. I finished the season at 67-31. So I think you might have picked up a game or two on me. We're probably pretty close if we went back and tracked it for the whole season.
So. I think I'm 3 behind you.
Okay. So Mott's and JR. Now, none of these games are truly meaningless because the first 2 matchups I have on here, you guys are technically playing for your money back. So Mott's versus JR. The reason I have this as the least important is plain and simply JR seems to be checked out. He still started Jeff Wilson this week. He is an out player. These guys faced off in week 11. That was the week where Jamar Chase was still hurt. Christian Kirk was on bye, but basically these guys have the same teams. This is a very significant matchup because this was the matchup where I was in Ohio, or maybe it was the first one where Rob was on the show, where he predicted this was his winning streak to get him into the playoffs. And Dan, you and I did the math. If Rob had won this game, he would have had my playoff spot. And if you had done the trade that you did with me with Rob instead, he would have won and got the playoff spot. So a little bit of a weird rematch here, but JR seems to certainly not care about it. So I'm going to pick Mott's.
I've actually told Rob that story, that if I would have done that trade with him instead of you had been in the playoffs, I think he threw up a little bit at that point. But,
Well, hey, I'm glad I could throw it at him on the air as well. So
just dig it in a little bit more. Maybe we'll bring it up every week the rest of the playoffs.
I think that works for me greatly. But Josh Allen just tossed another touchdown before the Bills went into halftime. So nothing in this matchup has swayed my decision to pick Rob. Rob is right now projected to win by 20 points, and Josh Allen is sitting at 23 points at halftime. So I'm certainly picking Rob in this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Rob as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot we need to talk about with that one at all. I just screwed up and put the league in its own tab, so I'll fix that here in a second. For the second matchup, it's you versus Greg. I'm going to let you talk about this one first because we seem to disagree on it. So
yeah, I think Greg will get the win. Cowboys should have a good game against Jacksonville. Watson didn't do enough to make me feel secure with where I stand. The Browns defense putting up 20-some points, I think, really helps him. So he'll get a chance at a rematch against Rob next week to win some money, even though it won't matter as much as losing last week to Rob. Yeah,
it'd be nice for him and Rob to face 3 times in a season. So week 5, you and Greg played. Greg won that matchup by 38 points. However, Chris Godwin was hurt. And what's interesting is for your team, only T. Higgins, George Kittle, and Mike Evans are remained starters for you. On Greg's team, Dak Prescott was hurt. Tony Pollard hadn't emerged yet, and Debo was healthy. When I was looking over these matchups, it did come out as a close matchup. Tight end is going to carry you. You got Kittle's best week at the best possible time. So I was really leaning on the fact that tight end is going to carry you. I expected Watson to be a little bit better, so I do agree that Dak Prescott's probably going to beat up on you a little bit. I would have liked to have seen a better game out of Devin Singletary. However, I think you have him beat at wide receiver as well, as long as T. Higgins is ready to play. So I think these are the things that are going to play in your favor, and so I am actually picking you in this matchup.
Well, I hope you're right.
Yeah, you versus Rob for $50 is a fun matchup. Now we get into the first draft pick matchups, and the matchups are Horvath versus Darren and Brian versus Kenny. And I went in and kind of looked. This whole season I've been saying only Brian and Kenny have their ones. Horvath has his one. And not only does Horvath has his one, he has Darren's one.
And my one.
Well, and your one, but your one is set. In this bracket, all Horvath needs is him or Darren to win this bracket, and he walks away with the first pick and the third pick, no matter what. Those are if one of those wins. The worst case scenario for Horvath is that Kenny wins the bracket, and then Horvath gets the third and the fourth pick. So, I mean, it's not bad no matter how you cut it. So Horvath clearly has more to play for here. These guys faced off in week 6. Darren won by 9. Only 5 starters still remain from this game. Connor and Olave were hurt back then for Darren. So who you got in this one, Dan?
Oh, I'm going with Horvath. His team's been playing really well lately. I mean, a little late in the season for it, but for his luck to finally change. But I'm sure if he can get that first pick, that'd be nice for him. I think he's earned it this year. But I look at the matchups. I think Horvath will take this one.
I completely agree. I hate both quarterbacks in this matchup. I wouldn't be surprised to see them both score sub 10 points. I think Horvath has the big advantage at running back. I think this could be a good Najee Harris week. I think this could be a good James Conner week. I think the wide receivers kind of cancel. Conklin, Noah Fant had a great week for Darren, but Conklin should also have a great week. Detroit very bad against the tight end. You kind of wish it was Mike White out there instead of Zach Wilson, but that's neither here nor there. But I completely agree. I'm picking Horvath here. It's a close matchup, but the only real advantage is Horvath's running back, so I'm going to stick with that.
I will say that the Lions have been hot.
Very hot.
With Wilson out there, they could end up with some short fields off some turnovers. I think I could see Goff putting up decent points.
There you go. Lions defense has gotten hot at the right point, but they've gotten hot against running backs, the opposite of what they were early in the season. So that could open things up for the passing game as well. So we'll see how that goes. Brian versus Kenny, the last matchup of the losers bracket. They faced off all the way back in week 2 when Kenny was still trying. Kenny won that matchup by 25 points. Only one starter is left from that game. That is the man, the myth, the legend, Justin Jefferson, who had a monster game today. I have Kenny winning this matchup. It was close. I kept battling back and forth. I wasn't sure. The Cousins points, when Brian and I were actually playing Call of Duty when that game started, and Cousins had -3, 4, 5 points, something like that. And Brian was feeling himself, but Justin Jefferson was having a bad game at that point. But instead, they both explode to end the game. But the Cousins points really help. It's going to put Brian into a hole. The Taylor game was obviously a letdown, but Brian's running backs are almost always a letdown. I love Greg Dulcich a lot this week, so I'm going to pick Kenny to win. However, if my guy Zonovan Knight goes off, I think Brian could have a very good chance of stealing this matchup. I am going to pick Kenny. I won't be surprised if it's Brian.
I think Kenny wins as well. I'll be rooting for Brian just because, he's started a lineup every week. So I'll go with
that's true.
I'll go with that guy wanting him to win over Kenny for that reason. But I think Kenny's in a better spot and should pull off that win.
I will say one other thing that weighed heavy on me is Kirk Cousins went off. 35 points in our league is a big week, no matter how you cut it. I think Tom Brady could have a good week against your Bengals this week. Deshaun Watson just put up 291 total yards against them, and I think 250 through the air. And if Deshaun Watson can put up 250 through the air, you would think Tom Brady's going to have a pretty big week.
Have you seen Tom Brady play?
It's very bad. It's certainly not Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I just don't see it. That's why I cut Brady. So.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was going through and looking at some of the matchups this week. There was one, you cut Brady, and I didn't know Rob cut Darren Waller. He's on your team now. I missed those cuts when they happened. So too focused on my own team there. So, all right. And now we get into the playoffs, Dan. I'm going to put myself as the first matchup because I think Terry and Xavier is the more interesting matchup. So it's me versus Stevie. We faced off back in week 10. Stevie won that matchup by 31 points, just beat the absolute shit out of me 5 weeks ago. However, that was a game where Joe Mixon, Keenan Allen, and Ramondre Stevenson were all on bye. It was actually almost right after I think I did that Mixon trade with you. It is a new quarterback for Stevie. I thought he was going to run Matt Ryan out there and get that dud, but he pivoted to Goff right at the last second. But Mark Andrews was on bye back in that matchup. Who you got, Dan?
Oh, I think you're going to walk away with this one pretty easily. Even if Murray wasn't hurt, I would have taken you to win this game. I think you just have a better overall team and a lot more upside on your team than Steve does.
I would have been a little bit more concerned with Murray just because of the rushing ability, but Denver's defense has been hot. I liked Michael Pittman a lot better when he had only scored 10 points. So him and Lockett canceled each other out. The bad Mark Andrews game, I think, is what really sealed this for me. So I only have a big advantage when it comes to Mahomes and Travis Kelce, but it's such a big advantage. I'm feeling pretty good about this one myself. I'm going to go ahead and pick myself to win based on that advantage. The bad day for Andrews could not have come at a worse time.
Well, I mean,
he's been having bad days for a while now.
He hasn't been fantasy relevant since week 6. So I have another league, so I know he's been hot garbage.
Yeah, it's been really bad
for a while for him. I think the White, the running back for Tampa Bay, is going to have a bad game against the Bengals run defense. They've shut down Henry and Chubb the last couple games, so I think you're going to run with this one. You should be able to rest easy most of the day tomorrow.
One thing that I think helps is Denver's already good against wide receivers, and now DeAndre Hopkins has Colt McCoy throwing the ball to him, and I think that's going to dig another hole for Stevie tomorrow. And then I think the best matchup, and probably the matchup that bears the most playoff implications because these two teams are just stacked. Terry versus Xavier. They faced off way back in week 6. Xavier won by 17 points. However, that was Derrick Henry and Jamal Williams bye week. It is a new quarterback for Xavier. I think he was riding the Kirk Cousins train back then, and he obviously has Tua Tagovailoa now. I haven't quite looked at the halftime stats, but Tua's having an absolutely awful game. 101 yards, 2 fantasy points with our league scoring right now. I have Terry winning this game. I've been riding this Terry train for a little while now. Obviously, Xavier's running backs went off this week, but I think Terry's running backs can go off this week as well. And then Terry just has that the advantage at quarterback. Justin Herbert, when I was going through my rankings, I think Justin Herbert's the QB1 this week. I think he absolutely torches Tennessee, which is a double burn for Xavier as a Titans fan. So I think he's going to see Herbert beat up on his Tennessee Titans and beat up on his fantasy team. I'm picking Terry in this one.
I want to pick Terry. I've been on Terry all season. I thought Terry has a great team. I'm nervous for Terry. Austin Eckler hasn't been doing his Austin Eckler-y stuff.
That's fair. And the Titans have a very good run defense. Waddle's
not been putting up points for Terry. He's not having a great night as we speak right now.
Yeah, 4 points.
I'm gonna predict Terry to win. But I am nervous for Terry. I think Xavier could easily pull this off, especially seeing what his running backs have already done.
This was the hardest one to pick because you're going against the projections here. Like Rob's projected to beat JR by quite a few points. Greg is projected to beat you by 10, but I am picking you in that matchup. Horvath projected to just beat down Darren, and then Brian and Kenny are 1 point off. But with this one, I truly like Terry's team better. But I mean, I've been shitting on Xavier's team all season long, and he just keeps winning. So I guess there's the fact that I don't quite know what I'm saying. So
I will say that while the Lions have been hot, I am nervous about him starting Williams. That
makes sense. They've been leaning a little bit more on DeAndre Swift lately, but I feel like Terry's in that conundrum right now that if you don't start him, he goes off, and if you do start him, he doesn't. I mean, Raheem Mostert going against Buffalo with 108 yards already at halftime. That was certainly unexpected. I guess you could maybe consider Antonio Gibson against the Giants. Who would you start over Williams?
I would have when they said Wilson was out for the Dolphins. I would have considered.
You would have pivoted to Mostert.
I would have at least considered it. And maybe Terry did, but I'm nervous about Williams tomorrow. I'm a big Williams fan. I drafted him. I mean, I think that he has the potential to still have a good game, but it just makes me nervous.
Yeah, it's absolutely fair. It's something you have to take into consideration every time you're dealing with Jamal Williams. Is it's touchdown or bust, and the Jets defense has been no joke. They've been one of the better defenses in football, and it's the reason the Jets themselves are actually in a playoff position at this point. Before we jump into the little game and get to the end of the very quick show, Dan, I just had it on here as choose your champion. I'll go first. I've been riding him the whole time. I think Justin Herbert's going to get hot. I think his running backs are going to be fine. It's weird to pick my champion who's projected to lose this week by 20 points, but I'm continuing to call Terry Wagner my champion, his first championship in the league.
Yeah, I agree. I've been saying Terry for weeks. I like his team. I think he wins it against Taylor.
Well, that breaks my heart. No, I know Taylor and I were talking this week, and Taylor said he is not going to be sad to see Terry or Xavier get kicked out of the playoffs. He does not want to face those running backs. So we continue to write Phil off. I went back and looked at on our playoff show. I got 4 of the 6 playoff teams right. But then the very next week we made some adjustments, and I got up to 5 of 6 playoff teams right. And the first week we brought playoff teams onto the show, I got 5 out of 6 playoff teams right. The only one I got wrong was first place 13-1 Phil. Did not make my playoff picture until week 4. So
I think, while we made adjustments all year, I think that whatever we predicted from the start of the year should have carried a little more weight. Like that with first episode, I think we should go back and.
Well, here's what I'll throw at you is the one thing is when we did our first episode, people still had their weird rosters where they hadn't made cuts. So when I did all of my math, like I really shit on Xavier's team in that first episode. I have him fighting for a spot, but not in. When we did that, I gave Xavier a hard time. The very first week, essentially, I readjusted my rankings and gave Xavier one of the playoff spots because he had fixed a lot of his positions. He had traded for some wide receivers or something. So
not only that, that's how I think about it. Looking back this whole season with the crazy trades that happened, any prediction was pretty much hot garbage. For anything before the trade deadline. And
yet I got 4 or 6 playoff teams right on our first documented call. It's just what I do. You probably did the same exact thing, except you picked yourself. So we know you were wrong on at least that one.
Actually, I don't think I had myself in there.
I don't know if you did. All I know is we gave Phil a hard fucking time this season, and he stood up and he took it. And then he came on the show and just made us look silly. I thought he was a great guest last week as well. Speaking of last week,
Phil's good people. He's fun to be around.
He really is.
Especially when after McKinley loses and that kind of stuff. But
see, I just don't have that connection anymore. But it was definitely a good show. Highest score. None of us picked either of the two high players because it was a Jacksonville stack that won the game. Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram were your correct picks. However, I did win out of the people who made picks. I had Jalen Hurts and Justin Jefferson, who combined for 56 points. Dan, you had Mahomes and Henry. Drifter had Josh Allen and Dalvin Cook. And Phil took Mahomes and Nick Chubb. So it actually wasn't even close. I think I beat you all by about 20 points. It was pretty bad. So you guys know the game at this point. Most of you aren't playing anymore. I'd love to get some text messages or post it on the message board. We're just trying to have fun out here. Drifter, if you watch this show later, drop it in the YouTube comments and I'll make sure you get your credit next week. I'm guessing you couldn't get your lunch break off in time to come join us this week, but we loved having you on the show all the time. But Dan, let's go ahead and get into it. Who is your pick for top quarterback, top flex play of week 15?
I am going to take Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Travis Kelce at tight end. Kelsey's been hot lately. I think they're going to keep riding him against Houston. I think Houston's they're at the point of the year where they're just going to kind of call it. They put Pierce on IR for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so I think Hurts has been hot. He's going to keep being hot. So those are my two.
I'm with it. Never a bad idea to pick Jalen Hurts, as Phil will tell you. I'm either really boosting Terry up here, or I'm really fucking Terry over. But when I did my rankings, it came out that Justin Herbert is my QB1 for the week, and Dan let me have him for the contest. And Derrick Henry is my RB1 for the week, and I think he is going to have a monster week against the Los Angeles Chargers, one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. So I'm either really fucking Terry over, or I'm boosting him to a big playoff win because that's why I picked him in this playoff win. I think Justin Herbert is the QB1. I think Derrick Henry is going to be the best flex play. It's going to be an interesting game, probably one of the better games to watch tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that one.
I'm interested to see how Tennessee. They're on like a 3-game losing streak, man. Let's see if they're what they're going to do here.
I want to dig into Tennessee in general, and maybe not for this show, but maybe it could be for this show, and we can invite Xavier on at some point. Tennessee for the last 2 years has really struck me as an absolute dog shit team. And I don't know if we talked about it, Dan, on this show or if we talked about it in real life, but I found myself literally shocked last year when Tennessee had the bye. And I follow football closely, and it never occurred to me that Tennessee had a good enough record to be the 1 seed in the AFC last year. And like, they just didn't feel like a good team, this, that, and the other. And it was shocking that they were the 1 seed. And then the fact that they are still winning what is obviously just a garbage division, the fact that they are still winning even with that losing streak just still throws me off of my equilibrium. But the garbage division certainly helps there. So.
For Tennessee, they're built on a running game and a really good defense. And that doesn't, that doesn't catch everybody's attention. So I think that's how they're sneaking up on you like that. But the problem for them is their defense, while it's been statistically pretty good, it has been letting them down lately. Especially against Jacksonville. You kind of understand losing to Philadelphia. You can understand losing to the Bengals in a close game. But getting your doors blown off by the Jaguars, that's a bad look in December.
Another bad look for our resident Colts fan, Stevie, is your team blowing in the biggest lead in NFL history while technically still fighting for a playoff spot. So that was certainly an ugly one. Matt Ryan clearly not the answer for the Indianapolis Colts, though losing Jonathan Taylor in the first half of the first quarter certainly didn't help. So
the Colts are that weird team. I feel bad for Stevie because they're like stuck in that middle ground where there's like no hope at the end of the day that they're going to either get a good quarterback or make the playoffs.
They keep winning too many games to tank for a quarterback. You're absolutely right. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. The Browns pulled off that win today to get your Bengals up to first place. Definitely a big one for you. Now you have, when we do our little bets at the beginning of the season, you have the Bengals playoffs and Super Bowl, or did you just do Super Bowl this year?
I put money on the Bengals to go to the Super Bowl, and I put money on the Lions to go to the playoffs.
And that bet is still alive, though you certainly would have rather seen Minnesota lose that game. So,
I don't think they were ever going to.
I don't think it would have affected it.
It's more about them just getting that wild card spot. I'd be happy. Lions are probably one of my other teams I like besides the Bengals. And you just feel bad for Lions fans. Yeah. Get them and have some fun.
Absolutely. All right, Dan, I think that's about enough time we've wasted on the evening. You got any parting words for the people?
I love you guys. Good luck to everyone in the playoffs, except for you, Ryan. No.
Oh, wow. That's fair, because that's basically what I'm going to say, except for you, Stevie. Stevie, you're my cousin. We share a last name. We cannot share a fantasy football victory. So fuck you. I know we just spent a wonderful day together in New York City, and it was a great time with the kids hanging out and us hanging out. But you're in the first year of a rebuild, or technically the second year of a rebuild. You don't deserve this yet. I deserve this. Your team is going to fail miserably. You're a failure. I'm going to win. Have a great night, everybody.
I love you, Steve.